If you've been looking for a comic about a 10-foot tall clown who forces people to stare at their reflection until they die, and you wanted that comic to be directed by Wes Anderson, then boy do I have a comic for you! Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're looking at issue 1 of The Seasons by Rick Remender and Paul Azaceta. Azaceta? Rick Remender has been a steamroller lately. He's got Gromit, he's got Holy Roller, he's got The Sacrificers, he's got Napalm Lullaby, and now he's got this title. You may only know him from his work on X titles like Axis and Uncanny X-Force, or maybe you know him from Deadly Class by him and Wes Craig, but if you haven't taken a dive into his creator-owned stuff, he's one of the best writers out there right now. And this new series just reinforces that idea. Mostly. This issue, even though it's still $3.99, is super long. It's like double size. But for all the pages we get, there's not a lot of plot going on here. A lot of this issue is spent establishing the setting, and I'll say more about that later, but as far as the plot goes, all we know is that we have this 10-foot clown called the Ringleader who goes around with his traveling circus or whatever called the Imps, and he rolls up to a city and virtually wipes it out. At the very beginning, we see Neo Cairo, which is a city that he and his band of imps just wiped out, and all the survivors in this city are stuck looking at their reflection, and some of them are dead, probably because they starved while they were staring at their own reflection. And then the rest of the issue is spent in New Galia, which I assume is just this world's version of France, and by the end of the issue, the Ringleader has rolled into town with his band of imps, and we get this very potent and exciting sense of dread for the city. Now, you've probably already noticed that it's very cartoony and bright, and that has a lot to do with the influences on this comic. At the very end of the issue, Remender mentions that he's writing a love letter to Tintin, Winsor McCay, and Miyazaki, which, if you're not familiar with Hergé's Tintin, Winsor McCay's Little Nemo in Slumberland, and Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli movies, then prepare to have your mind blown because they are some of the greatest artistic creations of the last 100+ years. So I don't know if I would go around comparing my comic to those, but whatever you want to do, Rick. Glancing through this comic, it is really easy to see all of these references written all over every page. The poses, the composition, the sense of movement, the sense of adventure is all straight out of Tintin. The colors and the characters and even some of the line work seems to be directly pulled from Little Nemo in Slumberland, and what seems to be the prevailing reference to Miyazaki's work is the 30-page sequence of this character chasing a letter. Yes, really, I counted, it's 30 pages. Maybe just like a tiny bit excessive there? Now listen, Remender also mentions that he wanted this comic to read like a storyboard for a cartoon, and it certainly does. Every single moment is highlighted, the transitions are really fluid, you feel like you are watching this on TV. But the problem is, if this was an animated cartoon, this would only be the first, 3 minutes of the cartoon? And then you would have another hour and a half to enjoy the whole work of art, whereas we have to wait a month to see the next maybe 3 more minutes of this cartoon. And I can certainly appreciate that in Miyazaki's works and in Eastern graphic literature as a whole, they like to focus on establishing the setting by focusing on a series of details so you have a strong sense of where the characters are and how it feels and how it sounds. And that is certainly cool. I wish that more Western comics had that because a lot of the mainstream comics feel like they're just overlooking the setting a lot of the time. But I think that in this case, considering it is not a cartoon, it is a comic book, the setting is not quite interesting enough that it merits 30 pages of exploration. All these little moments of the main character interacting with these people around the city is fun, but I don't think that half of it was necessary to establish the setting and establish the character. And the effect it ends up having on me is that by the end of the issue, I feel like nothing really happened. Moving on, a couple things I noticed is that the Ringleader seems to use vanity when he's wiping out a city. If he leaves there and everybody is staring at their reflections in the mirror until they die, then I think it's reasonable to assume that he has something to do with vanity. And from what we've seen of this city that he just showed up in, New Galia, it seems like this city is already a little bit vain. We see ads all over the place for Lavish, which is this perfume or whatever, which probably means that this city is ripe for the plucking to this Ringleader guy. Another thing I noticed, which would probably be hard to not notice, is that this main character, whose name is Spring Seasons, is maybe able to understand and communicate with animals, or maybe she's just crazy, or maybe everybody can do that and they just choose not to. It's unclear exactly what the situation is, but it does give the character a sense of eccentricity and whimsy. I will say, though, that it absolutely boils my blood when I see somebody with a goldfish in a bowl. Never put a goldfish in a bowl. Never, ever, ever. Do you know how big a goldfish gets? Bigger than you'd expect. If I don't see the main character put that goldfish back into a real tank in issue 2, I'm gonna write a very strongly worded letter to Rick. Anyway, my conclusions about the writing of this issue is that I can see the influences and I really appreciate them, and I'm glad that we're taking our time and expanding these moments, and I am intrigued about about the plot and where it's going to go, but I think I would be more intrigued if we had advanced it just a little bit more. I mean, how many times in these videos have I complained about pacing, about things moving way too quickly and not having good transitions and not feeling fluid? Well, this might be just a little bit too much. When it comes to the art in this issue, I like it, but it's not my favorite thing ever. I don't have a ton of experience with Azaceta's work. Really, the only other stuff of his that I know about is his flashbacks from Jason Aaron's Punisher run, which is amazing, by the way. Don't let those dudes who drive lifted pickup trucks with the American flag and the Punisher sticker on the back window fool ya. And I feel like it was an appropriate style for that series. I get really strong Chris Samney vibes from it, maybe a little bit of David Mazzucchelli. I'm sure there are dozens of other artists that he's referencing that I'm just not familiar with yet. There aren't that many times when I look at it and say, wow, that's genius. But it is a very solid style for a comic that's emulating cartoons. It would be ridiculous of me to talk about this comic without showing you this gorgeous centerfold picture, which looks like something directly taken out of a Little Nemo in Slumberland strip. I mean, the colors and the shapes and the line work in general, it looks like you took Winsor McCay's art and turned it into a pop-up book. So I wouldn't say that I'm blown away by the art, but considering the influences and what the comic is trying to accomplish, I do think that it is a very good fit. Earlier today, I finally read Will Eisner's A Contract with God, and the introduction is by Denny O'Neil, and in that introduction, he mentions that the only thing an art critic can do is decide whether or not the artist accomplished what they were setting out to do. And I think the answer to that question is emphatically yes. This comic is a love letter to Tintin and Winsor McCay and Miyazaki. It is lush, warm, escapism fantasy with a dark twist. And if you've ever enjoyed a cartoon in your life, which don't lie to me, I know you have, then this should be on your pull list. So I'm going to rate issue 1 of the seasons a low 8 out of 10. I love a lot of things about it. I just wish that it was going a little bit faster. But it's fantastic work from Remender as usual, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the series. So if you read it, let me know what you think. I'm Kurt Williams, and you are somebody else.